Evening, everybody. Welcome to our November meeting of the Fallbrook Climate Action Team. If there's anybody new here, we're a nonpartisan group of people, mostly from Fallbrook, but not exclusively. And we put on a monthly presentation about something related to climate change on the last Tuesday of every month. And if you'd like to volunteer, we could use more volunteers either to make phone call reminders to people about our meetings, or there's other things you can do too, like attend meetings either virtually or in person at local government groups to represent our interest and to give us feedback on what's going on there. Talk to us later or send a reply to one of our emails if you're interested, or let us know in the chat. So tonight we have with us Pam Hetherington, who is on the state executive board now of the Sierra Club, and she's also part of the state committee of the 30 by 30 program. And so she's going to tell us about that, as well as how she got into this work. So take it away, Pam.
Thank you, Joy. As Joy said, I am Pam Hetherington. I wear many hats in this community. I serve on the executive committee for the San Diego chapter of the Sierra Club. I run an organization called the Environmental Center of San Diego. I am newly elected to the Sierra Club California Executive Committee. I belong to the Marine Protected Area Collaboration, which is an part of my 30 by 30 efforts. I'm a longtime activist. I've lived in Central California, where I was conservation chair for their local chapter of the Sierra Club. I spent a dozen years as the treasurer for the Surfrider Foundation chapter in San Luis Bay. Just wherever I can fit in, I try to squeeze in. So 30 by 30 was a bonus for me. I started co-leading the 30 by 30 efforts upon their inception with my then co-lead Dave Grubb. I don't know if anybody's heard of Dave Grubb. He was a longtime California activist. And it was our vision that brought 30 by 30 to the Environmental Center of San Diego. So without further ado, 30 by 30 is actually a statewide collaboration of regions that are working towards protecting 30% of terrestrial and coastal lands by 2030. It's a big lift, but there's a lot of people working on it. We are part of a steering committee called Power in Nature, which brings all of the regions together once a month, sometimes twice a month, depending on what's going on. So there's the steering committee called Power in Nature, and then all the regional groups of 30 by 30 participating. And just about every region has somebody there. Our oversight is by the California Natural Resources Department. It was their idea to have 30 by 30, which was then fashioned around in conjunction with President Biden's America the Beautiful. So these are the regions that are more important to the bottom part of the state. We have the inland desert, San Diego, LA, and then the Central Coast, and it goes up the state. So there are 13 regions altogether in the 30 by 30 movement. In our San Diego regional group, we have over 25 organizations that have been participants. We've submitted comments on the original Pathways to 30 by 30 document. We collected input on local projects, submitted a project list of about 30 projects to the Natural Resources Agency. And then we highlighted high priority projects. We sent letters to the state budget committee. We actually met with we lobbied a little bit up in Sacramento. We mapped priority projects and then again met with state agencies. So there's more or less probably 30 organizations right now that are involved with our 30 by 30 group. Just to give you a little bit of background on how we got here, 2017, E.O. Wilson's Half Earth, Our Planet's Fight for the Life was the inspiration. In 2020, Governor Newsom signed Executive Order N8220. President Biden's America the Beautiful initiative came in 2021. And then in 2021, California Natural Resources Agency starts the California by 30 by 30. And then in 2021, the working groups began organizing. Then the draft Pathways to 30 by 30 was released for comments. Every one of the regional groups submitted comments and project lists. And then in 2022, the final Pathways document to 30 by 30 was released. 2023, we saw Governor Newsom sign into law SB 337, which codified 30 by 30 into state law, which meant there was no going back at that point. So where we are now, there's the statewide non-governmental organization coalition called the Power in Nature. The Resources Agency established statewide coordinating committees and then forming partnerships with agencies and other nonprofit organizations. California 2022 budget gave us a lot of money for 30 by 30, and then they took it back when the budget looked pretty dour. The San Diego Regional Group works closely with the Inland Desert Regional Group because we do share a very intimate border. And just to give you an idea of what the regional groups are working on in the San Diego area and the Anza Borrego area. Right now we're going through what they call gap analysis, and a gap analysis is a general appreciation of protections. So a gap 1 area would be managed for biodiversity, where maybe they allow mountain biking or off-road vehicles. Gap area 2, where a lot of the natural disturbances are suppressed. And gap 3 and gap 4 statuses are the ones with the most biodiversity protections. So we're trying to get as much of the areas in San Diego into gap 3 and 4 areas. Right now, we're working with the county, the California Natural Resources Agency. We have about 50 San Diego County properties that qualify for 30 by 30, and they're going through gap analysis right now. So you can tell in the dark green is gap 1. So there's a lot of areas there that might be somewhat preserved, but allow a lot of maybe activities that others wouldn't be. And also thrown into the mix of 30 by 30 is the marine protected areas, where you can see over on the left-hand slide, the blue areas. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 MPA areas in the county of San Diego. So we're not close to 30 by 30 or 30% in the marine areas. I think we're at 16.2%. So we have a lot of work to do in the coastal areas of California. As far as the terrestrial side, San Diego has probably surpassed 30%, but that's not a reason to stop. So. And where do we go from here? Our big thing, and we all know that San Diego is the biodiversity hotspot in the United States. So there's a lot to protect. Part of 30 by 30 is not only protecting unique biodiversity, but expanding equitable access. And I always like to throw in the term where feasible, because there are places that need to be wild and not have the footprint of a human being. And also to conserve places that help our region achieve carbon neutrality and build climate resilience. So it kind of encompasses everything: climate protection and resilience going forward in this state of climate change. And here are some websites. We have a webpage for San Diego 30 by 30. On our website, see if I can bring it up real quick. We have the interactive maps that, let's see if we can get there. Are you all following along on this? Yeah. Okay, so you can click on some of the areas that are saved and go down and see a description. This is a trail that I'm working on in La Jolla for my organization that is part of the 30 by 30 efforts. It's a
We
public
can't
access.
see, we
you
can't see
can't?
your screen. Okay,
Oh,
all we can
no.
see is for more information. It did not
Oh,
automatically go there.
I thought that we had this set up that it was interactive. Let me see if I can get out of here now. Let's see, yeah. Can you see that now?
No, you might have to reshare your screen or something for us to be able to see what's on your screen now. Because
Okay.
we're kind of stuck on your slide.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's never happened before. Okay. Are we back on there? No?
You're not doing any screen sharing at the moment.
Okay, let's see.
I think you have to reshare it.
Yeah, okay, let's go down to, let's see. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's see, we can scroll down. Okay. Yeah, so just conserving places that help our region achieve carbon neutrality and build climate resistance. Protecting lands and waters is especially important to our biodiversity standing in the US. There again, I'm sorry, I thought this was interactive. I was going to take you to the map so you could see where the areas are listed. But if you want to take that web page down, it's really kind of cool. And so our interactive maps in San Diego feed into the statewide interactive maps. So we get recognized everywhere. So what can your group do? You can join the coalition. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month, 2 to 3 p.m. Send us an idea for a project, a 30 by 30 project. We have a form to fill out that kind of gives all of the information on the parcel that you want to save. The funding agencies, the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Ocean Protection Council, the Coastal Conservancy, all look at the 30 by 30 lists when they're looking at grant proposals. So one thing that we do is reach out to elected officials and remind them of the importance of 30 by 30. We were key in the budget process and Proposition 4, which thankfully passed this last November. That will backfill a lot of the money that the governor took away when he first gave us a very generous budget for 30 by 30 and then had to renege it. So Proposition 4 is kind of untouchable. And it was fashioned by the conservation community. So we made sure that things like management, monitoring, and enforcement was included in the Prop 4 budget, simply because the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and a lot of the state agencies are totally underfunded right now. So Prop 4 will help boost their ability to manage lands. And we also do a lot of public outreach on the importance of 30 by 30. And Otay Valley Regional Park Restoration and Connection was just recently added to our 30 by 30 list, which is going to take some pretty fallow land and turn it into a community park. So there are lots of different buckets of money. This was a real great success story. This was the Proctor Valley acquisition that was done earlier this year. It was a big, it was 1,291 acres that was preserved and added to another preserve. So it's a pretty massive land savings. And there's a picture of some of us at the celebration with the Proctor Valley in the background. So this was funded in part, it was a $60 million purchase. half of which came from the Wildlife Conservation Board, and then other fundraising by Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, and a couple of the other larger organizations. So, and I think that's about it. San Diego 30 by 30, protecting nature in our region for enjoyment of everybody. I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Cynthia had a question. You want to just talk it, Cynthia?
Sure. I put some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
How are the lands selected for preservation under 30 by 30? Like do, you know, conservation lands already go in there? I mean, I'm a little confused.
If you look at our list of 30 by 30, there's some pretty, an organization will be protective of a certain area, say like Fallbrook. Say like there was an opportunity there to purchase 100 acres for conservation. You would approach us, we would, have you fill out the details. We would put it on the list. And then when you go, say, to find funding for the purchase of that land, you could refer back, oh, it's on our San Diego Regional 30 by 30 list. And that kind of helps the funding agencies see a different, a different dimension than, say, if you just went to them and asked for funding. Because you've already kind of gone through our screening process. You have the support of all of the organizations in 30 by 30 behind you. For funding. So it works pretty seamlessly. We have, I think, 5 of the San Diego projects that have been funded. So you could go ahead.
For example, there's the Fallbrook Land Conservancy, and they have conserved a lot of sites. Are those automatically folded over into the 30 by 30 program?
If they have contacted us, or if they have contacted the California Natural Resources Agency directly.
Okay, so not necessarily then.
Not necessarily, you're right. We can't put them on there if we don't know about them.
Oh, so maybe there's more, maybe.
And
then what are the criteria that need to be met for conservancy through 30 by 30?
I'm gonna look for the form really quickly here. See if I can get out of here. I can't. See. I can send the form to Joy. I can't put my fingers on it right now, but there's actually a page of questions, like we want to know longitude and latitude. We want to know if the property has been used for like agriculture. Is it fallow? Does it have sensitive species on it? Is it a wildlife corridor? There's, different degrees of preservation that not so much that we're looking for, that we want to explicate on the list of projects in San Diego.
So if there are buildings on it, does that put it out of
Pretty much, because I don't think it would be hard to analyze it in a gap situation, like, what is the building there for and what does it impact? So it wouldn't necessarily be something that had a built environment on it.
Okay, all right. Then if I just as a private citizen look at an area and I think it's wonderful and I think it needs to remain as it is and not be developed, how would the 30 by 30 program take that on possibly, and might there be eminent domain through the state that could be brought to bear, or are there is there some legal tactics that could be involved to
I haven't heard of anybody using eminent domain in the 30 by 30 process. A lot of times when you're going for funding for land purchases, number one, you have to have a willing seller or nobody's going to talk to you. Number two is that generally the grants are given to 501c3 non-governmental agencies or governmental agencies to do the work. So, you know, you would probably want to partner with somebody with a 501c3. And, you know, they could they could be the fiscal agent for the purchase for your group, or, you know, you being an individual.
So
It wouldn't be something that you could by yourself apply for a grant for a purchase. It would have to be probably with a nonprofit.
So the tool is purchase then. It's not just, is it always purchasing is the tool to accomplish it? Or
No, there's
purchase-
restoration grants for 30 by 30 projects as well. So if, say, like Del Mar Mesa has vernal pools on it, but they've been degraded by rogue mountain biking and just people not caring about the environment. So they awarded, I think, $1.9 million to do restoration.
Okay. And what about people taking land in private ownership and committing to leave it undeveloped? Is that something that could be done?
You know, it could probably qualify for the 30 by 30 list. It probably wouldn't be, it wouldn't be in it for the funding. Like we have Rancho Wajito on our 30 by 30 page because the landowners do a great job in conservation, but they're not, how can I say it? They're not bound by any conservation requirement. So.
Okay. Thank you. I asked a lot of questions.
Can I ask?
That's okay.
Can I- A few months ago, we had somebody talk to us about the multiple species conservation plan. How is that related?
Because the North County, especially multiple species conservation plan, will need mitigation lands. And what they call is, you know, those lands will have to be purchased. And so those could qualify for 30 by 30 funding.
Where does this funding come from that you're talking about?
The state of California has a really great California Natural Resources Agency that is funded to do things like this, like the 30 by 30 project. And so the funding funnels through, like I said, the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Coastal Conservancy, and the Ocean Protection Council. So they each get a chunk. And now with Prop 4, that money is designated in certain areas for certain communities. Like we have a whole funding page for 30 by 30 San Diego of where the funds could be going. And I'm sorry it wasn't put into the slide, but
Now earlier, somebody mentioned the Fallbrook Land Conservancy, and that's come up before in the multiple species conservation plan. The county, Fallbrook Land Conservancy is buying land with private money, private funds. They're a 401c, C3, and they're raising.
Are they a C4, Tom?
No, there is 501c3.
501c4?
501c3.
Okay.
And they've bought a lot of property around Fallbrook and even down to San Marcos. And I asked somebody from the county, and they said, yes, they are counting the Fallbrook Land Conservancy
Or
property.
the North County.
And
MSP.
they're they take credit for as much as they can.
Mhm.
That's a pretty hard goal. 30% of everything is a lot.
It is.
And you already got private money preserving some lands,
Mhm.
and they're not. I don't know if they are asking for state assistance on that or not. I think that's what my question is.
You know, I don't know about the Fallbrook Land Conservancy, whether or not they are seeking 30 by 30 funds. Or, but most land purchases of any size are usually funded through the Wildlife Conservation Board, or if they're coastal, the Coastal Conservancy. So, private donations to put lands in public spaces or public pockets is a great idea, but not everybody can pull that off.
No, not everybody can.
Yeah.
But it all depends on what the rules are.
Mhm.
The Land Conservancy is promising to preserve the property in perpetuity.
Mhm.
Is-
Well, most of these lands set aside are in perpetuity. So I know that the county has a list. Right now, we're working off of, I think, over 50 properties that are going through gap analysis. And we know that there'll be more with the North County MSCP. And some of these lands that the county have, there's no footprint on them as far as human accessibility.
Could you explain what you mean by gap analysis?
A gap analysis is the generally accepted protections, and there's four classifications of gap analysis. One being that the land isn't that valuable because it's been degraded or used in a way that doesn't preserve it. Gap 4 analysis would be the highest form of protection. So if it was like the Proctor Valley piece of property that was purchased this year, that probably is a gap 4 because it doesn't have a whole lot of activity on it. Some of the surrounding areas of Proctor Valley have grazing on it, so they might come in at a gap 2 or a gap 3. It all depends on what the land has been used for and its biological integrity and what it contributes to the biodiversity of an area. So,
What
Pam,
about oh, excuse me.
no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll save my question.
Okay. Pam, this is Alan Nunez. I'm an independent. I'm trying to understand Proposition 4, and in particular, the budget. How much money did Proposition 4 raise for conservation under the 30 by 30 program, number one? And number two, even though it's a macro amount of money, which I understand is hundreds of millions of dollars, how much is delegated down to the 30 by 30 program? And are different agencies, like what you mentioned, the California Natural Resources, the WCB, the Coastal Conservancy, does each agency actually get a piece of that sort of funding? And in particular, what I'm thinking of on your 30 by 30 map, San Diego map, you did not have, it seemed like you didn't have a lot of coastal properties that had been submitted. And I would think that the Coastal Conservancy would be a big target for funneling money from Proposition 4 under the 30 by 30 program. So my question is along the lines of budget, and how is the money qualified to come down to areas like San Diego?
it'll all be through grant processes. You'll
Mhm.
apply for a grant for the project that you're working on, and whether or not it's funded to the tune of, $100,000 to maybe a couple $1 million. It's all allocated from the California Natural Resources Agency and funneled through, like I said, the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Coastal Conservancy, and the Ocean Protection Council. And
So are you
circle,
California Resources Agency is the lead agency with
correct.
all the state agencies, like even Fish and Wildlife and all those other agencies are
Are
under the
Pretty
natural.
much, yep. If you go
Really?
and look at their work chart. And to circle back to your coastal question, protecting coastal areas is a lot heavier lift than preserving inland or terrestrial areas, only because it's, how can I say that so that it's understandable?
Well, I mean, it's
The
not hard.
marine protected areas are very hard to get. If you've ever been to a meeting with a bunch of fishermen, you'll know that. because
Mhm.
they don't want any regulation, even though the regulations are intended to preserve and enhance fish stocks. You can go to any MPA in the state of California and it'll be just thriving and teeming with sea life because they know now that they're safe in those marine protected areas. And the fishermen are just so afraid that if they're expanded, it's going to hurt their livelihood rather than looking at it in the converse that the guy with the biggest boat's going to get the last fish the way they think. And unless there's stocks coming up to replace what they're fishing, then there's not going to be any fishing. So, it's a dance that happens through the Fish and Game Commission. They do what they call a petition drive. I think
Mhm.
San Diego had 4 petitions this last round. I think there were a lot of petitions overall, and so they separated them into bin 1 petitions and bin 2 petitions. Bin 1 petitions were ones that were probably, I want to say, the low-hanging fruit that they thought maybe they could act on more quickly than the bin 2 petitions. There was 3 petitions by Wild Coast. One was a boundary expansion at Swami's. There's a tidal pool area just south of Swami's that they wanted to include in the Swami's State Marine Reserve area. And then there were a couple petitions that were boundary clarifications. So one was in Bataguitas Lagoon and the other one was in San Elijo.
Interesting.
So
What's a typical
there's a lot of moving parts, Alan.
What's a typical timeline for a transaction? How long from submittal to actual close of a transaction? And what's a typical size? Is there like too small of a size to even waste time on, or how does that work?
Some of the restoration projects are 100,000 to 500,000 to $1 million.
Okay.
The Proctor Valley land purchase happened in record time. I
Mm.
think we started in late 2023 and it closed, or mid 2023 and it closed probably mid 2024. But
So a
like I
year.
said, they only came up with 30 million and the Nature Conservancy and everybody else came up with the other 30 million for the purchase. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen on these land purchases. But like I said, the number one is you have to have a willing seller. So the eminent domain wouldn't probably enter into the conversation.
Yeah. I noticed too on your website, biodiversity, conservation are the 2 big words that are put up here. And I just went online and looked up a little bit more what conservation really means under the 30 by 30 program. And it seems to be like if you could document, and I'm asking this as a question, if you could document wildlife, if you could document endangered species, if you could document those sort of things, especially on the coast that may be endangered or in threat of some way, is what I just read, that probably, I would think, help more clearly qualify the gap application, if you will, providing that
Yeah.
sort of information would expedite it and qualify it. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, gap is only on the terrestrial side.
Oh, interesting.
It's hard to measure land mass in the ocean. There's no boundaries like we have on land in the ocean. So, the
understand.
analysis there is a little bit different. And that's where the Ocean Protection Council comes in.
So is there an application under the Natural Resources Agency that is online by chance that you could look at, that I could look at to more clearly qualify the process?
I don't know if there's one online. That's a very good question that we meet in 2 weeks. So let me bring that up and then circle back with Joy.
Yeah.
When
Just-
Pam sends that to me, I can send it to you, Alan.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to get clarity on expediting the process, qualifying for the capital that would be available, and the timeline to do a transaction. Once you make a commitment and go down the road, if it's a year, that's a commitment of someone's time. You have to be prepared, I suspect.
Oh, Alan, let me give you an example. One of the projects on our 30 by 30 list in San Diego is a trail that the Environmental Center of San Diego is working on. It's called the Princess Street Coastal Access Trail. I picked up what they call the offer to dedicate on that trail in 2017. We
Oh,
got funding for phase 1 and phase 2 from the Coastal Conservancy. We're just now doing the permit stage with the city of San Diego. And then phase 3 will be construction and opening of the trail. So figure 2017, and I'm not quite to phase 3. So it's a time commitment.
that's 7 years.
Yep.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things that are going to take a lot of time.
Right. Government still moves slow.
Yeah, they do.
Princess.
I think Leslie had a comment, didn't you, Leslie?
Yeah, the marine protected areas that are out on the water, all of the fleet knows the boundaries of where those are, and it's pretty well controlled to keep the fishermen out of there.
It depends on what they are classified as, because there's different, like the area where the Matlawal State Marine Reserve and Scripps Institute of Oceanography are a state marine reserve, which means no take, no touch,
Mm.
no take.
Yeah,
Some of the lagoon areas are called state marine conservation areas, where they do allow, say, like shore fishing. So there could be a different combination depending on what part of the coast you're at and what the protections afford.
well, I know that most of Swami's, I think most of the Swami's area is protected, and you can't even surf fish down there.
No, you
The
can't.
game wardens are on it, keeping people from fishing where they're not supposed to be fishing.
Yeah, there's a very strong marine protected area collaboration up and down the state, and San Diego has a really solid chapter down here. So we meet quarterly. We were the ones that went over all the petitions for San Diego. So there's a lot of how can I say it, intersectionality between environmental groups and conservation groups when it comes to 30 by 30. There's actually an ocean subcommittee under 30 by 30.
I'm reading online, Pam. This is Alan again.
Mhm.
On the Coastal Conservancy Agency, because I was actually thinking about this. I go by, for example, Batigitos Lagoon quite a bit, and I was thinking of estuaries, not necessarily just the beach and the oceans and the fish and those sort of things.
But upland, yeah.
But yeah, inland, the connection of the waterways and what is this called? Blue line streams and that sort of thing. So I guess under the 30 by 30 program, those would be key targets as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are. In fact, the Environmental Center got a grant from the San Diego Foundation a few years ago. And what we did is we mapped all of the lagoons and estuaries in San Diego County. And then we did a research project around those areas so that if any parcels came up for sale, we could identify them and make a move to have somebody purchase them to add to the inventory of coastal preservation. So,
Interesting.
Pam, I'm wondering about all the tribal lands. Do you have any relationship with the tribes, the Pala or the Rincon, Pechanga?
when we held the 8th annual Environmental Leadership Summit this year, our first panel was an hour and a half with tribal nations. So we had 5 representatives from the tribes in the San Diego region. It was the first time that we've been able to get them to participate. And so we learned a lot. They learned a lot. They started to become interested in not so much the terrestrial side, but the coastal side, because they don't have a way to the coast that is their own. They can go to the beach like every one of us, But as far as having a Kumeyaay coastal area, that's not really something that anybody's paid attention to. So when we started the Coastal Access Trail, we involved the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians, and they're a partner in that project. And that opens up an avenue for a lot of the tribes to maybe go down there and do ceremony, because the trail we're working on terminates in the Motlawal State Marine Reserve. So.
Hmm.
So, and there's an effort by the California Natural Resources Agency. In fact, they were just in San Diego a couple months ago and met with, I think, 16 of the 18 tribes here. And they did that because earlier this year, I think it was in February, they sent out like 180 letters to tribes to ask them to engage in 30 by 30. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with tribes, but they're very, they're understaffed, and their ability to communicate on a level with nonprofits is really hard, because tribal leaders get the letters on their assistant's desk, and if they see it in a month or two, you're lucky. But, you know, and that's not a fault of the tribes. It's just us trying to engage them, because tribal ecological knowledge is probably going to be the way of the future. And that's a very important term, TEK, tribal ecological knowledge, because they come from eons of time working with nature and in nature, and they have lessons that we have yet to learn.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm glad that that's being pursued.
Mhm.
I'd like to see all the tribes be able to have beach access. Because at one time they did, right?
They did. This whole coast was their I don't want to say backyard, because they harvested, but they harvested ecologically, not like us, like, you know, we want to fish.
Right. Well, I know in Hawaii, in Maui, after Lahaina burned down, there was a movement among Native Hawaiians to change the way the town of Lahaina is rebuilt, so that instead of being this dry, highly developed, populated area just on the coast, they wanted to go back the way it used to be, where the development happened along the streams coming down from the mountains. And that way they were living the way people were meant to live, next to the water, not just on the ocean, but all along the streams. And that, by changing their development, that would also change the atmosphere
Mhm.
and make it more temperate
Yeah.
and less arid.
I know the tribes I've been fortunate enough to work with are very welcoming and wanting to be involved, time permitting.
So
This is all new to them too, working in collaboration with the people that took their land.
Yeah, they're probably skeptical,
Very much so.
I would think.
Can I ask a question from earlier in the meeting?
Sure.
There was a trail mentioned, and I've forgotten the name of it, but it ended up in Del Mar.
The
What was the name of
Coast to
that trail?
Crest Trail.
The which?
The Coast to Crest, or Crest to Coast, however you want to.
Crest to Coast, okay.
Yeah, I think it's actually better known as Coast to Crest. It starts in Vulcan Mountain and terminates in Del Mar. It's not completed yet. There's still chunks that need to be figured out where the trails should be. Some of the terrain is pretty rugged coming off the mountain.
Vulcan Mountain is a consistent mountain. That's a big mountain to be climbing around on.
Well, I think they got that part done. It's the closer parts that are the troublesome ones right now. We haven't done a site visit out there. I serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Coast to Crest Trail, which is done by the Sandagita River Valley Park group.
Starts in Julian.
Yeah. Just by way of example, you know, the calls that I was on this morning about the clarification of the fishing opportunities at the Grand Avenue Bridge in Del Mar, where they just reposted the signs that say that you can fish from the shore, which is part of the State Marine Conservation Area permissions. Got the community all up in arms because the signs had been gone for a couple of years. And by the time the California Department of Fish and Wildlife could get them back up, it was a couple of years. And so people started, you know, getting upset that fishing was all of a sudden allowed, but it's always been allowed in that area. But boundary designations are really important. And we saw that because I think the 2 petitions by Wild Coast in bin 1 were approved with some modification.
David, you're in Riverside County, right? Oh, I was wondering what the adjoining region for Riverside County would be.
I
in
think that's part of the Southland on the map. Yeah.
part of the LA area.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know David Warren was talking to us before about wildlife corridors and having some of those in the area, especially around the 15, Highway 15.
Yeah, the Annenberg one I think is almost complete, isn't it? If not completed already, the one up in LA.
Oh, I don't
I
know.
don't know if it's been dedicated yet. I know that they broke ground and there was a big dedication that way, but I'm not sure what the standing is of it now. It would be great to have one over the 15, that's for sure.
Right, or under it or something.
I think over is probably the cheapest way than trying to tunnel.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? If you think of one later, you can send it to me and just reply to the email from FCAT and we'll talk to Pam about it. And when Pam sends me that form, I'll send it to anyone who expressed an interest.
I'm interested. There's a undeveloped ranch land property east of San Pasqual. I've always thought an appropriate as a county park. I don't know what its status is now, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of the valley. So I'll have to do this after the fact.
Well, you'll have time to think about it, John, and I'll get the form to Joy, so. Who knows? Anything's possible.
Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, then I want to thank Pam for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you all for letting me travel along with you and take you all over where I go. So.
Okay,
Thank you, Pam.
okay, well, have a nice holiday, everybody.
What's going to
Thank
happen
you.
next month, Joy?
Oh, so next month we're dark, December, and then, January is to be announced.
All right.
So have a happy holiday season, everybody.